his belly to share with the men and women of God. And so we honor God for him today. And we believe, how many of you believe you're going to hear from God today? Amen. Yeah, come with expectation. Come with expectation. Believe already, before he even get up here, that God is going to speak to you and that you're going to hear what you need to hear today. On yesterday, Apostle Sterling said, he said, God is so amazing and his word is so rich that the same word will go out, but everybody will get a different meal. The same word will go out, but everybody will get a different meal. Every now and then we'll all get a buffet and we'll all end up eating the same stuff. But God is so amazing. His word is so powerful that the same word can go out and that everybody can get their own meal. So today, get what you need today. Allow God to speak to your heart and speak to your mind and hear just what God is saying. And so I want you to stand to your feet as we reverence the man of God. And as I introduce the song and present to others, our very own Elder Folo Patterson. Come on, bless the Lord from him.
So please be seated. How is everybody doing today?
Better not an election over.
Right? I once again want to thank Apostle for allowing me this opportunity to share, because I've been having something pressing on my mind and heart based primarily off of things I was dealing with. And as I began to work through it, things began to come to light for myself. And the more it did so, the more I was like, I need to share this because it is applicable to everyone. So thank you, Apostle, for allowing me this. I don't plan to be before you long, but I do believe that what I have to share today is something that needs to definitely be heard, because we are all in the space of perception. And as y'all know, Looking Through the Fog was a book I wrote in regards to outlining and defining the idea of that. But it had me thinking about how our viewpoint changes over time. Think about when you're a kid. You see one thing, you want the cookie. And you're gonna whine and whine till you get the cookie. And as you get older, the idea of how to get the cookie changes, or even the relevance of the cookie changes. We go into teenage years, and what's important seems like all that matters in our life, but that begins to shift as we go into adulthood. Responsibilities kick in. We realize that, it's not as easy as I once believed it to be. When I became incarcerated, the idea of who I once was began to fall away. And as I began to go through my transition and my journey, I had to begin to see things through a different lens. It was a process. I began to grow into this new person. And the more I grew into this new person and the scales began to fall off, I began to realize that the perception that I had at one point in time wasn't applying anymore to where I was going. Matter of fact, the way I looked at things at one point in time had been destructive, had been a hindrance, had become an obstacle in my life in so many ways. So as I got to the point of trying to really understand what that meant for me, I began to attempt to understand how to look through this different lens and define it. So it came to the point of me writing the book, and the book was the idea of me sharing these perceptions and ideas and so forth and so on. And then it changed into being a fictional story, but still the same plot and idea of perception. But even then, it had to evolve. And one of the things I discovered in my journey of writing, not being a writer before, is that you have to have an outline in place first. So for me, beginning the process of writing this book, I started with a chapter, and I had an idea of what the chapter was going to be about. And I gave myself little bullet points. Okay, such and such is going to do this, and this, and this, and the end result should be this. Typically, I would do this when I would go to my little job on the yard. And by the time I got back from work, I would sit down, and my task became filling in the points. What's going to be the narrative that goes from bullet point to bullet point to bullet point to arrive at this conclusion of the chapter. And as I began to do this, it became easier for me to flow through the narrative of what the story would be because I had it outlined already in just boom, 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 boom. What I didn't understand until just recently is that as much time as I put into taking those steps, God does the same thing with us. There is an overall picture for our life that he has already designed, but he also designates chapters that we go through. And even with the chapter, wherever space we're in that moment, he has bullet points of, okay, this is going to take place, this should take place. The ending to your chapter should be this. But the difference is, God allows us the liberty to have the narrative. Now imagine what happens if my narrative doesn't line up with God's word. If it doesn't line up with what he designates as the outcome. For example, if I would have outlined the chapter to be such and such and such and such, and by the end of the chapter, this was going to happen. It was a dramatic ending. But when I got home, I started writing it, and the narrative I put in there was describing in a totally different direction. It would have messed up the whole chapter because I didn't stay on point. Now the two is a conflict because they don't line up. We do the same thing. So this is what I came to realize. I want you to repeat this after me. My perception directly dictates my direction. My direction produces my narrative. Let's talk about what narrative is. Narrative is defined in a literal sense as a story or account of events, of experiences of the life, whether true or fictitious. That's the literal definition. The figurative definition is an explanation or interpretation of events, your accordance with a particular theory, theology, or point of view. So what it is saying is, my narrative can be based on what I think I see. Let me say that again. My narrative can be based on what I think I see or believe biblically. The point of that is that the perception takes place first, which produces an action, a decision, a choice. Once that is done, then the narrative that comes from that decision and choice shows itself. It is produced. This has happened all throughout the Bible. But because we never look at it in that sense, we don't take the time to recognize that God has given us example after example after example of perception, direction, and narrative. So my question would be to you today. What's going to be your narrative? That's what we're going to talk about. Let's go to Daniel. Chapter 3. We're going to see an example of a narrative being displayed. Now, the story of the three Hebrew boys is one that has been told in probably every way possible. I really believe that there is no new way to present the chapter. It's just how the person who is presenting it lies it out. So for me, as I was thinking about this ideal of what a narrative is in my life, based upon my own situation at the time, my mind was brought back to these three Hebrew boys who in chapter 3 were put in a position where they had to make a choice. We've all had to make a choice of some sort on a daily basis, right? Sometimes bigger than others. In chapter 3, you have it here, Daniel? Mm-hmm. In chapter 3, we read about the wicked king Nebuchadnezzar, who was so full of himself, truly powerful, had more than anyone could ever wish for, but yet and still, he felt the need to be honored beyond means. So what does he do? He builds a golden statue of himself, 90 feet high, 9 feet wide. Y'all check me out, this is me. I'm doing it like this. So much so to the point that when it came time to dedicate the statue, he called everyone who was under him, the governors, the administrators, everybody in every part of the land that he ruled over, and told them, I need y'all to show up on such and such day because we gonna celebrate me. It's all about me, and you're gonna come see me. And when it's said and done, you're gonna bow down to me. So send the word out that everyone comes, and when they get here, and they hear all the musicians play these beautiful horns and loud trumpets and harps and all these instruments, at that time, everybody in attendance is required to kneel down and worship my statue. No ifs, ands, buts about it. Everybody, from the back to the front. Now, if this is not done, within that same hour, that person or those who choose not to will be thrown into a fiery furnace. This is my decree. Let it be so. So the word went out across the land, and sure enough, as ordered, everyone showed up. But there comes a time when you have to make a decision on who you're going to be and how you're going to operate. As we look at verse 7 of chapter 3, it reads, therefore, I'm going to read out the King James Version, by the way. Therefore, at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and all kinds of music, all the people, the nations, and the languages fell down and worshiped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar, the king, had set up. The 3 Jews refused to worship the image. Wherefore, at that time, certain Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews. How many know we all have haters of some type? Somebody that's waiting to snitch. Now, mind you, the Jews had already been taken captive and brought there, and the 3 Hebrew boys, along with Daniel, were selected for standing above the rest. They were put in a position of authority. They were given honor, whereas others who were of that nation didn't like that. So at any given opportunity to drop down on them, they was going to do so. So I'm sure they was probably salivating at the mouth. Oh yeah, you know them Hebrew boys, they worship this other God. They ain't gonna, I hope they don't bow down. Ooh. And the moment it took place, and they peeked their heads up to see the 3 Hebrew boys still there, hey, guess what? You know about being hated on, right? Verse 9 says, they spake and said to King Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. Thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man that shall hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoso falleth not down and worshipeth, that he should be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee. They serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. So, right from the point of this announcement being made, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had to make a choice. How am I going to operate in this space? When it came time for them to bow down and worship, their action, their choice, their decision was not to. As a result, now they was having this flashback. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then he brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Do not ye serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now if ye be ready, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye shall fall down and worship the image which I have made. But if ye worship not, ye shall be cast the same hour into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? Already he had changed up what he said, because now he's giving them a second chance. But they had already defied his decree to begin with the first time. So you telling me that y'all don't serve them like gods and you didn't bow down and worship when you heard the music, even though you know the decree was? I tell you what, I'm gonna give you one more chance. This time, when you hear it, bow down, or within an hour, you're gonna be in the furnace. But check this out. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thy hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. That right there became their narrative. Their choice and decision was based upon the lens they looked through. Their perception was, we are of God. Because of that, no matter what they say, we're not going to bow down to that, regardless of the circumstances. So when it came time for them to be confronted by the king, and he told them one more chance or else, their narrative became this. Our God can save us from you, so we ain't got to bite our tongue about it. And if he don't, we still not going to bow down. Here's the thing. Their narrative was not based upon automatically knowing the end result. It was based upon knowing who God was in that moment. Why is that important? Because too many times we get caught up in what we're dealing with in the middle of that situation. And because it seems heavy, because it seems thick, because it seems more than we can bear, we allow ourselves to change the narrative to fit what we are dealing with at the moment. Tell me you're getting this.
Mm-hmm.
What has struck me so much about how definitively they said this, because they wasn't risking going to jail, being locked in a dungeon. It wasn't a threat of being whipped or dragged by horses. There was a furnace already waiting for them to be thrown into. They could see it over there. But yet and still, what came out of their mouths was, this is what our story is going to be, not what you dictated it to be. Too many times in my life, I have allowed the enemy to dictate my narrative. God has said that I was called to do this and be this, and I'll be blessed in this manner, but because of the space I was in, the narrative became what he said it was. What happens, though, when our narrative is in alignment with God's will, with God's way? Well, let's find out, shall we? We're going to go down to verse 24. Now, he had him heat the furnace 7 times hotter. That is how furious he was. Oh, you going to talk to me like that? Turn up the heat. He turned it up so hot that the ones who turned it up got burnt up. Oh, well, who cares about them? Throw them in there. Now, once the 3 Hebrew boys were thrown into the furnace, 24 says, Then Nebuchadnezzar, the king, was astonished and rose up in haste and spake and said unto his counselors, Did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said unto the king, True, O king. He answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. There is no way in the world they would have known that would have been the outcome. But the narrative they spoke was in alignment with God, so God made it be the outcome. It already fit what he had in place for him. See, God already knows what's going to happen in our lives before we can even think the thought. Now, the thing is, are you going to take your path? Are you going to write your story? Or are you going to stay in line on my story? Because if you stay in line on my story, this is how it's going to end. And because of who they were in him, their narrative fit perfect to where at the end of it, those around them were astonished. To the point where when the king called him out of the furnace, not only was the bondage burned off of them, but not a hair on their body or clothes smelled like smoke. Then he gave them even more increase because of their faith in their God. Too many times I failed that test. Too many times I've been in the space of, woe is me, I can't believe this happened. Or just because my perception is so twisted and perverted and out of sync that the decisions and the choices that come from it produce a narrative that is far outside of God's outline for my life. And I wonder why the situation is as bad as it is. I wonder why I'm struggling in the space that I'm in. I'm wondering why I'm dealing with the things I'm dealing with. What's your narrative? Let's look at the flip side of that, though. In Matthew, chapter 14, we read the story of the disciples in the boat. Jesus has told them to go ahead and get in the boat, and y'all go on across. I'm finna go up and pray. I'll meet y'all later. Middle of the night, Peter sees a figure on the water. That can't be. Is that a spirit? Is that a ghost? Is that Jesus? Jesus tells him, fear is not. It is I. So here go Peter. Verse 28. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me come unto thee on the water. If that's really you, tell me I can come on out there. And he said, come. And when Peter was come down out of the ship, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched forth his hand and caught him and said unto him, O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? Peter purposely and intentionally asked Jesus, can I come out there to you? I want to test this thing. You doing it like that, I want to roll with you. Jesus said, come on. I'll meet you halfway. Peter steps out the boat. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. So he thinking he good. But the storm begins to rage a little bit. The wind begins to blow. The water slapping at his thighs. And instead of staying locked in and focused on what Jesus already told him to come, he looks around in worry and doubt and begins to sink. That reminded me of how we can go before God with things that we are desiring, wanting, needing, praying for. Well, God, your word declares that I can be, I can do, I can have. Will it be so? And as God is putting things into place, the struggles come. The wind blows. Something distracts us. And instead of staying locked in on him, we get caught up in what's going on around us. And guess what? We begin to sink. But here's the interesting part. So his perception changed, which affected his choices, his decision, his direction. And his narrative became this. O thee of little faith. That spoke volumes when Jesus said that to him. Because now it told the story of who he was at that moment. But also why he was in this position he was in. I have been going through some things the past few weeks. We had talked about how God had blessed and opened doors and made a way for me to get this job and gave favor, not only with my bosses, but those around me to be able to get on permanently to our raise. And then the finances started getting hit. Everybody come out the woodwork. We want half, literally. So I'm kind of like, wait a minute, I'm trying to get on my feet here. I'm not even 6 months out trying to reach that, and y'all taking half my money? Needless to say, the enthusiasm to go to work kind of dwindled, because every time I got my check, it felt like I was raped. I'm working hard every day, and this is what I'm bringing. What? Then I get a new probation officer who tells me even more is required of me. And I'm telling them, ma'am, how am I supposed to survive? Y'all talk about the recidivism rate and this and that, but when somebody's trying to establish yourself, y'all not even giving a chance for a person to get their feet under them before you cut them out. So to say I was a little discouraged is an understatement. Queen and I had conversation after conversation. I'm like, Lord, trust me, because I don't know how we gonna make it through this right now. So as I'm going back and forth every day trying to draw everything from inside of me, how to get through this, we kept praying, okay, God, just give us strength, and I don't care what it looks like, we're going to trust you through this. You know, you gotta psych yourself up some days, you know. For me, it's every day. We on the way to work, we prayed, okay, God, thank you for this day, bless, keep our mind, keep us focused, and no matter what it looks like. So at the beginning of the week, was that the beginning of this week? Monday, boss comes over, and he says, sign this. You already been in this position for 90 days, giving you a raise. Now, mind you, I look at the papers, 50 cents. All right, 50 cents. Flesh tries to say, 50 cents, what's that gonna do? That's $20 more a week, but you only gonna get 10 of that. So you're gonna take half. And by the time they're done, probably $8.75. Why get excited about it? But then God spoke to my heart and said, how are you going to look at this? Or are you going to see the ideal of more money being taken out? Or is it never going to be that I've multiplied you? I've brought you increase. This is $10 more than you already had. Are you going to see the favor that I'm yet bestowing upon you? What's your narrative going to be? So I'm standing there at the mixers processing this. I said, Lord, I need my narrative to be of you, not of my circumstances, not of my situation, not based on what it feels like or looks like at the moment, but in you. Because if I can walk in who you are, then I can say my narrative is victory.
All right.
My narrative is deliverance. My narrative is breakthrough.
Come on.
And as I began to feel that thing, I was like, man, I need to share this with somebody. Because it was bubbling. But it made me realize we put little thought into how much the way we look at things shape everything around us. We spend so much time and energy focusing on the immediate situation that we don't peel back layers and say, God, I see you beyond the here and now. We don't take time to recognize that, okay, because I'm in a foggy place, this is probably producing something in me that is not of you. Right. So I need to reassess what this perception is, because this perception is directly dictating my direction. And if my direction is having me stepping in